Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again, and this time I wish to talk about remembrance. Now this video especially has been created in the memory of my late professor, Mr. Deepak Chauffin. He was one of the best teachers, one of the best mentors anybody could have ever asked for, and maybe I may get a little emotional as I talk about him. As you can understand, he is no more in the physical form with us, but he's always stayed with me, and somewhere I think that people like him always stay with us in their essence. They always stay with us as our lessons through the lessons that they taught in our memories. So he was my history professor in college, and history happened to be one of my favorite subjects. And I know a lot of people do not like history, but fortunately most of the times my history teachers had been the ones who had taken history as a subject not as just dates and events that were happening at a certain point in time, but they had taken those events and made them into inter and intrapersonal stories that were personal to all of us, and stories that helped connect everyone at that particular point in time. And haven't we all always been story-making creatures? Haven't we all always been fascinated by stories? Haven't our learnings mostly always been through stories? So for them and for me, history was never about mugging up dates and mugging up events and mugging up names. It was more about understanding the nuances of those intrapersonal and interpersonal stories that we not only tell ourselves, but we also tell each other, that helps us connect with each other. So what was so different about Mr. Jorphin? He was the first person to permit us to go beyond the bounds and the bindings of the book. His classroom was the first space and place, apart from the playground, where we were allowed to express ourselves completely. There was no judgment of good or bad or right or wrong or comfortable or uncomfortable and pleasant and unpleasant, because somewhere he made us realize that that entire spectrum formed our complete package. Without one end of the spectrum, the other truly cannot exist in its whole self, and without the two coming together, the bigger whole truly can never be formed. So I'll take up an example over here, not necessarily from the history book, but I'll definitely try to relate it to other examples that have formed a part of the human history, that have formed a part of the human evolution, that have formed a part of the human civilization. So let us take up an example of a very small insect that we call as the cockroach. Most of us do not like to see this creature in our houses or in our surroundings. Most of us also feel quite disgusted with this little insect. Firstly, they do not look very appealing when they're constantly all around us. Secondly, they stay at every place possible. You think of a place and you can find a cockroach there. You think of a pipeline, you think of a garbage, you think of a sewage, you think of the garbage bin, you can see a cockroach around. They can lead to food poisoning, and the way in which they grow, it's really difficult to keep a check on them. It's really difficult to keep them under control. And that is one perspective of the stories we tell ourselves about the cockroaches or about a certain thing. And mind you, cockroaches have just been used as a metaphor to understand the bigger picture. And mostly we all perceive our stories through one lens. And this is one part of the story that we have told ourselves over and over and over and over again. But here was this teacher who would then flip the coin and then would ask us to look at the different side of the story, who would then ask us to have a different belief about the narrations that have been told and retold over and over again. So what is the other side of the story? The other side of the story just might be that the cockroaches are indicating that there are places in our surroundings that we need to clean up. The cockroaches might also be telling us about the story of resilience, because they have been on this planet way before dinosaurs even existed. Cockroaches also have a 360-degree view of their environment, so they might also be telling us to take a step back so that we can have a 360-degree view of our interpersonal and intrapersonal stories. And if a cockroach's head gets cut off, it can still survive for whole 3 weeks. So maybe a cockroach might also be telling us that we may survive probably better if we get out of our condition conditionalities of our heads a little more often. When he taught history, whether it was about the Indian history, whether it was talking about the world wars, whether it was talking about the Industrial Revolution, he talked from both the interpersonal and the intrapersonal experiences that we have always shared. He created a space and a place in his classroom wherein every thought was allowed to be expressed without being disrespectful. He allowed for the existence of our subjective and objective experiences. He was one of those people who created a space wherein two entirely different beliefs can exist, wherein two entire belief systems can be looked into, can be inquired, can be questioned. And somewhere I feel that there has been a dearth of such teachers, a dearth of such mentors, a dearth of such storytellers who can bring forth the entire story before us and who can enable a space wherein we can tell and share our whole stories as well. So let's truly appreciate teachers who do not teach us about this or that, but who teach us about this and that. So let's try and think about the message that Mr. Chauffin was trying to convey to all of us. Let's try and think about that a little more, and I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And guys, if you do like the content of my video, please do like, share and subscribe.